So let's start with a new Blender project. Delete the cube and add an icosphere with one subdivision. This can be any other shape. Next, bring in a metaball. We need a high resolution for the metaballs, so increase it to 0.14 on viewport and 0.12 on render. Now we parent the metaball to the icosphere using Ctrl P with transform. Now for the icosphere, make sure to go to instancing and select vertices. Now let's open up the Geometry Nodes editor. First, let's rename our icosphere. Add a new node tree and delete the input geometry. We don't need that. And add in a cube. We need to set the dimensions to greater than 1 as the metaball is 1 unit in volume. Next, add an instance to points node. For the instances, drag in the metaballs. Make sure to check as instance for the metaballs to work properly. As you can see, they work like metaballs now. Next, we add a set position node. To manipulate the position, let's add a noise texture node and change it to 4D. As you can see, this messes up the system, so add a vector math node, change it to subtract and subtract 0.5 from it. Duplicate this node further and change it to scale. Now as we increase the scale, the metaballs drift further apart. Next, we want the fluid to be continuously moving even when there is no sound. So we add a wave texture, connect it to the noise, change the direction to Z and type to triangle. As you can see, it doesn't directly work, so we have to change the distortion value to be greater than 0. Perfect. Now we want this to keep affecting our ferrofluid continuously, so we add a scene time node to the phase offset. Now as we can see, it moves as time passes. We also add a math node set to divide in order to control the speed of it. I've set it to frames. You can change it to seconds if you want. Now, here is where the tutorial will be slightly different for you, depending on whether you use sound nodes or not. If using sound nodes, just open the panel using N and press Load Audio. Select the desired audio file and press Analyze. This takes a few seconds. Okay, once this is done, bring in the spectrogram node and we will use the 0 output, which will give us the base info. Plug it into a map range and that into a math multiply for further control. Next, bring in a combine XYZ and connect the multiply outputs to X and Y as we do not want the Z to change. Connect this to the scale of the instance in points node. Nothing happens as the Z scale is set to 0, so change that to a positive value and we can see that something is happening, but it doesn't look great. So we change the map range to greater than 1 for the minimum and also the maximum. Now let's tweak a few settings. Reduce the Z size of the cube to a value near 0.5. Increase X and Y scale to 5 and increase the number of vertices to 3. Also increase the scale of the wave texture. Let's set up a few materials. Select the ferro, add a new material, make it metallic and then black. The material needs to be applied to the metaballs for this to work. Reduce the roughness and we are pretty much done. Also, if you want to add a bumpy texture to its surface, just use a noise texture, add a color ramp, increase the scale, feed it to the height input of a bump node. Reduce the strength and we should have a pretty decent bumpy surface. Now let's make a few final tweaks. Increase X and Y size to 8 and vertices to 6. Let Z vertices be 2. You can mess with the multiplier value, though it's not very necessary. Increase the scale so that the balls are further apart. And this looks pretty good for now. Now for the workaround, for those of you who aren't using sound notes, spawn in an empty plain axis. Go over to the scale and press I. Uncheck both X and Y and make sure that you're on frame 1 of your animation. Go to the graph editor and go to Bake Sound to F Curves. Find your file and bake. Now back in geometry nodes, bring in a value node and add it to the map range. Add a driver. Add a driver and select the empty as the object and change the type to Z scale. And that's it. It will now move to the music. As you can see, this version cannot be made to move accurately to the bass input. It moves in general to all sounds. But yeah, that's all. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.